You are invited to a feast. We all are. But as any good guest, we're going to bring something with us. Depending on the kind of feast we're going to, depends on what we want to bring. So even though I have all these ingredients here, and all of them can make good things, I'm going to choose what I want based on the outcome, based on the audience. Do I have somebody who really would like this crusty loaf of bread? I would choose the flour and the yeast and the salt and the water, and I would make that for them. Maybe I'm going to a dessert party. I'm gonna leave the yeast and the salt out, but I am gonna add in some sugar, some cocoa, some butter, chocolate chips, and other things so I can make a delicious chocolate dessert. You see, depending on what I want the outcome to be, or maybe what my audience is, I choose different ingredients. If I throw all the ingredients in, it's not gonna make anything delicious, but we can make perfect things if we choose wisely. It is the same with our authors of the Gospels. They had specific audiences, specific outcomes that they wanted. And so they chose their ingredients, their stories of Jesus, their things that they represented very specifically to prove a point. In the interest of time, we're going to dive into the Gospel of Matthew only, but I promise you, the themes and the ingredients and everything are there in the other three Gospels as well. As a quick refresher, our four Gospels are Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. We have Matthew, Mark, and Luke, which are called the Synoptic Gospels, or synoptic meaning same, and John, which is kind of an outlier. Most scholars believe Mark was written first, and Matthew and Luke with the help of Mark, and that John was later, even as late as 90 AD, while the others were all written by 70 AD. So for Matthew, who was he writing to? Why was he writing? That is what we're going to get to. Matthew, he was a Jewish man, and he was writing to the Jews. He wanted to prove to them that Jesus was the King of the Jews, their Messiah. So he chose to talk about the kingdom of God a lot, a phrase that would be very near and dear to the heart of the Jewish person. He chose to reference the Old Testament over 120 times because the Jewish people knew they had their Old Testament memorized, unlike us today. He also chose to parallel Jesus and Moses. He was almost trying to prove that Jesus was the new Moses, the perfect Moses, who would fulfill it all and not mess things up. And he did go on to do that. One amazing parallel he showed, the Jews knew, and we know, that Moses went up on a mountain and he received a law. Jesus in Matthew is teaching on a mountain about how he has not come to abolish the law, but to fulfill the law to the last dot and tittle. And he does so ever so beautifully for us. Another thing that Matthew knew he needed to check the box for was letting the Jews know that Jesus was from the line of King David, because every Jewish person knew their Messiah, their king, would be from the line of David. So Matthew starts off with a genealogy, the lineage of Christ. He starts with Abraham, shows how Abraham goes to David, and how David then goes down to Jesus. He checked that box right away. Jesus is from the line of King David. In addition to all of these things, Matthew was very specific in the stories that he chose to show that Jesus was the King of the Jews. He did not choose stories like the Samaritan woman at the well. That would not have proven that Jesus was the King of the Jews. He didn't choose the story of the widow with the 2 mites and how that sacrifice, that offering, was more tender and sweet to Jesus than all of the money that the others were bringing, because that might have offended his audience. Instead, he chose some very specific things. There were specific prophecies of miracles that the Jewish Messiah would do, that he would be the King of the Jews, and Matthew chose to share some of those. One such messianic prophecy was the healing of a leper. So as soon as Jesus comes down from the mountain, we see him encounter a Jewish leper in Matthew 8:1-4, and he heals him. A messianic prophetic miracle, or miracle prophecy, that was fulfilled by Jesus, and Matthew pointed that out. We also see that Jesus in Matthew 12:22 cast a demon out of a mute and deaf man, and that again was a messianic prophecy miracle. I can't get that right. Messianic miracle prophecy. Matthew knew exactly what he needed to show his audience. After this miracle, the Jews that were there and watching, they literally said, "Could this be the son of David?" And Matthew puts that in his writing. He wants the Jews to start to realize what he is showing them using the ingredients that he is putting in. When we have all the ingredients, as the gospel writers did, we need to choose wisely what to put in based on the outcome that we desire. Now the authors, they had their divine inspiration. You and I have our cookbooks, or maybe you're a really good cook and you can do it without, but we need to know what to put in for our outcome. Those authors, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, they wrote 4 different gospels for 4 different audiences, and now we get to feast on the word. But you have to make the choice to feast. You have to not just own a Bible or smell the bread. You have to eat it, open the Bible, read it. You have to not just walk by the bake shop, come through church or walk by church and see that it's there. You have to bite into it. You have to let it transform you. There's a feast for you. You're invited. What will you do? I know what I will choose to do.